Hello. We're going to go on with the next presentation by Alexander Schubert. Thank you, Alexander, for accepting our invitation. I'm actually absolutely delighted to have you here after we met at Laboral back in 2008 in our first series of lab conciertos at Laboral Centro de Arte. And I was willing to have you over for ages, and it's a great pleasure to have you. I will quickly introduce Alexander, even though he doesn't need an introduction. He's a very well-known artist. I'm sure all of you know all his parkour, but Alexander studied bioinformatics, multimedia composition. He's a professor at the Music School of Hamburg. His interest is exploring the border between the acoustic and the electronic world. In music composition, immersive installation, and stage pieces, he examines the interplay between the digital and the analog. And he creates pieces that realize test settings or interaction spaces that question modes of perception and representation. Continuing topics in the field are authenticity and virtuality, the influence and framing of digital media on aesthetics, views, and communication is research in a post-digital perspective. And recent research topics in his works were virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and online mediated artworks. He's the founding member of ensembles such as Decoder, and his work have been performed in more than 700 times in the last few years by numerous ensembles in over 30 countries. So thank you, Alexander, for being here, and I give you the floor.
Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for being here. It's my pleasure to be here. So I just caught the last glimpse of the talk before, which looked really interesting. I think more. And I really also already saw some overlap to what I'm doing, even though what I'm doing has maybe some research components in it, but it's really more artistic work, I would say. So I don't know, maybe that goes together well. So I'd like to start with a few questions. Namely, who is in control of my body? How artificial is the model of myself? Is the world around me staged? How to transcend, overcome oneself. So those are kind of primers I would like to, or primer questions I'd like to throw out there, which maybe over the course of this talk we can keep in our heads. And some of the pieces kind of deal with that, and well, trying to answer that completely they will not manage, but they are circulating around it. So I structured this talk in 3 steps. One is I really briefly say something about myself and what interests me in general. I want to show 3 related works that lead up to the main work that I want to talk about, called Anima, TM, which is a very current piece, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about that because I talked so much about the older pieces already. And yes, so the main part will be the third one. It's kind of a music theater piece, if you want, in the broadest sense, and that's I think brings together a few things that I've been doing in the last 5 years or so. So we had already the kind invitation, so I probably don't need to say so much again about myself. So I'm a composer. I work with multimedia and kind of moved away from music works to something that's much more performative and theatrical, but really not in a way like spoken theater or something like this. More in most senses that it's kind of settings, that the pieces are more about the settings, about creating a sort of experimental setup. I mean, not in the strictest research sense, but still creating a technology-based scenario that has some sort of an interface or something that the people involved in it, may it be the performers or may it be the audience, kind of have to relate to. And so the protagonist of these pieces often is that, as opposed to characters playing a role, or as opposed to musicians performing a piece. So yeah, and so a lot, and we will see that, and maybe I'll concentrate on that the most, is a lot of these pieces deal with control and agency, like who is in charge. So considering these things sort of as test settings to kind of to deal with this question. And a lot, or some of these pieces have kind of virtual components to them, and in a strictly technical sense, but also in a more, maybe more metaphorical sense. So, and this is gonna be ringing through the whole talk, I hope. So thinking of virtuality not just as a technology means, but also as something that might be just as present in the way our brain works, or the way we interact with the actual, in quotes, world around us. So maybe that as a super brief intro to what I do and what I'm interested in. And maybe some of these things will become a bit more clear as I show some examples. So yeah, I chose to bring 3 pieces that sort of led up to this piece, so that for those of you which probably are the majority, don't know all the works that I've done, so that you don't only just see one work, but see a bit of a broader spectrum. So one of the, well, not really old, but a bit older piece that I did is called Codec Error, which has several things in it, but the main thing is it has 2 percussionists and a double bass player kind of navigating through a stage in stroboscopic light, kind of turning them into somewhat holographic appearances. I'm not going to focus on this so much. And the piece has, and that is something that I've been doing for a lot of pieces, has these kind of breakpoints where it first creates a setting, an appearance, or something that's well, that's kind of perceived as true somehow, and then it breaks, and we look at the same thing again with a different angle, let's say. So let's say, I can already say that it's a thing that really interests me in creating these settings, and then at some point switching the view on it. So in that piece, I'm just going to show like really the end of it. There's a point where all the instructions that these 3 players get while they navigate through the black stage in this kind of strobe lights. So they have these in-ear click receivers and are being told what to do at what point, how to perform this piece. And towards the end of the piece, or as the piece goes on, there's kind of more and more of this machinery is being kind of made visible, made audible, and in the last part, all the instructions that you hear are also being put on the PA, and you get sort of the driving force behind it. So I'm just going to play a short moment of that. Can be a bit louder.
Move head to the side. In 3, 2, 1, now. Take 1 step backwards. Now. Lights off in 3, 2, 1, now.
In the next noise block, the light will go out. In the dark, you will lie on the floor. By this, finishing the piece. When the light goes on again, 5 seconds later, the piece is over.
All right, that's a very short glimpse into this piece, and as it sometimes is, or that's something that happened to me a lot, that kind of the last part of a piece becomes the main parts for the next piece. And so these last minutes where basically every instruction that you that the performers needed to do was audible. I built several pieces around this idea of having all the commands, all the kind of stage instructions and so on audible, so that there's nothing happening without it being introduced, let's say. The same thing happens in the next piece I want to show a short excerpt of, called Convergence, where also in this setting a system kind of generates commands, spoken text commands for musicians, which are then being read into both on an audio level and on a video level into a generative system, and they are then being projected, their faces, their bodies, and their voices and the instruments that they play through a AI captured and AI modified representation of themselves. So there's the setting of people also following these instructions and then kind of being read in, and then encountering their transferred or transformed selves. So this kind of already opens the idea or the trajectory I would like to take you with of using technology for one on a really as a tool to kind of to take something and then to kind of liquefy it, or to make it changeable and editable. So it is something that I find that some of these pieces are rotating around. So the question of how to destabilize something, to destabilize a model of how we see maybe ourselves or how we see the world around us. So a short excerpt of that. So what you will see is it's a piece for 5 string musicians, and you see they are kind of intermorphed and transformed faces in this section. So yeah, you realize those are all very very short excerpts to kind of just give you an idea where I came from and where I'm heading with the piece Anima, about which I'll talk a bit in more detail. But so the thing I would like to stress here is, like I said, this kind of this dissolving process. This so it's an instructed setting where the captured performers are then kind of being dissolved or sort of liquefied, and I find it interesting as an to take that also as a metaphor of how we see ourselves or how we see also others. We normally perceive everything, these models of what that we have of others and of ourselves, as something super solid, super given, which it arguably is not. It's a construct that we are building, an internal construct, and this idea of making things less solid again is something I find a chance in that technology. And the last section I wanna the last prior work I wanna show is called Genesis. I have a super short teaser for that, and in that there's already a voice, my voice, explaining parts of it. So I'll probably let myself do a little bit of explanation, and then we'll add a few things once that clip has been played.
Genesis is an online computer game which takes place both in the real world and online. And in this setting, the users or the players have the possibility to log in via an interface in a browser over the internet and control a human avatar in a real life setting here at this hall.
Can you change VR sets with other avatars? Explore the person. Explore the arms with your hands.
These are the things that I ordered and that we can use now.
Take a photo of the machine.
It's both a game, both an experimental setting, an exploration space, and a setting to learn about digital and virtual impacts on our real analog life.
All right. So maybe in one sentence, how that project worked. It was a big empty factory hall, which we had for 7 days and 7 nights non-stop. And there were 4 human players with a video camera and cameras whose point of view, field of vision, and what they heard was transferred to this to these browser interfaces, and people could use them like a human avatar, like a human body, like in a computer game. So it had this. Also, it had this overlay of a that you would have like with a status and everything, like which would make it look like an ego shooter in a way. And for that piece, there were no rules, no mission or no aim. So it started with an empty hall Sunday night at 0 o'clock, and then went on for 7 days to kind of to fill this world. And it again, well, 2 things maybe in this context might be interesting. One is it had this very strangely empty, super virtual feeling in this factory hall that nobody saw, just like us of the team went there. It was very surreal, empty, really like a computer game somehow. Even though for the performers it was also very tiring, a very physical experience. So there was this big friction between something very artificial and something very bodily. And the other thing is kind of using another body as your tool, as your embodied avatar to kind of kind of as an executor, let's say. And how you relate with that led to a lot of very different and a lot of very I thought interesting interactions between player and executor, let's say. So and that leads me, sorry for rushing through these 3 so quickly. So this leads me now to the topic I mainly want to talk about, the recent piece called Anima. And when I just been speaking about executors, that is kind of one of the main things within that piece. People executing commands, executing actions. So that's what happens in that setting that we're going to look at. And before I explain more what the piece is about in more detail, the big question is that how action and inner life kind of correlate, or which one precedes the other. So it kind of plays with the idea of a school of thought that considers action preceding inner life or action preceding emotional state. So that obviously is a very debatable topic. So I'm already looking forward to the Q&A. So as opposed, well, yeah, a bit as opposed to a lot of other pieces that I've been doing, Anima had something like a narrative or something like a story. At least I started with that. I think in the end I couldn't escape myself, and it didn't really turn out to be like a theater play, like a drama play. I kind of feel I don't really have that in me. But it started from an idea that a person would go into a VR simulation space that's AI driven, so command driven, and do something comparable to constellation work. So maybe the people know what that is. It's kind of this sort of psychological therapy form in which you can either use different humans and put them in a constellation to exemplify something and to then also change that, or you can do that with objects like small figurines or even just any other object. So it already has this kind of this idea or this friction between an object and a subject, or something that's just a representational thing within a constellation or within the inner life of somebody. So the idea is that this place, Anima TM, does that, provides this simulation space in order to iteratively generate these constellations and to iteratively change them and manipulate them. So it's kind of like a therapeutic process or an adaptation process, or you could again think about it as something to break something that's stable, or to deconstruct something. So the goal for that could either be therapeutic, or could be self-optimization, or could also be a kind of a unlayering of things or destruction of something. So that's kind of the background idea of this piece. And some of the I think the key concepts or points I put down here are already mentioned now. So it basically starts with this one person going in the setting, putting on the VR headset, and then being transported in these sort of simulated spaces. And all the other projected persons kind of are like vessels, like executors. But it's in the end also the main person around whom this piece revolves, also kind of is an executor only. So everything basically is just executing. And I first want to show you in 2 slides very quickly how the setup for the piece works, and then I'm going to show you 1 or 2 short example clips so that it's not that theoretical. So the stage looks like this. All these brown planes are made out of fabric, and on all these fabrics video projections are applied, and turning this whole thing kind of into a everything is being projected on to turn it into a 3-dimensional space, let's say. And the additional thing is, and that's kind of what we also had in Genesis and in other pieces, is that the one at the front here, this darker fabric, is a hollow screen which you do not see, but only if you project on it, which we used mainly to also have this kind of computer interface, or also again a bit like game-like or like simulation software interface on it. So the idea again is, as in a lot of these pieces, to consider the stage or the space kind of as a as a as if looking into a computer in the end. So this kind of post-digital look on the stage, or on the humans on the stage, is something that I've been trying to do in different variations. And this one is really a bit like looking into Sims or something. Like you see everything's being projected on. You have this computer world, and you have these figurines in a way navigating through it. And I'd like to play 2 short excerpts out of that for you.
The world is a mirror of my freedom. Control. Control. Control.
Control. Control. At the outside.
Very slowly turning into a hardcore grin. Duration 90s. I'm your puppet.
I'm your puppet.
All right, so that was a short excerpt of it. So yeah, you can see these performers navigating through the space and being put into kind of changing constellations that are often being held and repeated over and over again for longer times. We didn't hear that here so much. In the next short clip I'm gonna play for you, you will also hear these instructions. So maybe I can already say that, like, technically all these the 7 performers within the piece again work with click track, and like every action, every word that they say, everything is kind of being counted in or being generated outside of them. So there's no there's very little agency, there's very little room for expression for the people involved within the setting. And so some of those are audible on the outside as well, and some are not. And now we're gonna also listen or see a passage where these control commands from the system are also audible for the audience. Yes.
Imagine this world as a test setting in which your compliance to the proposed rules is examined. This is one of the oldest thoughts in my head. For what else is suffering if no one is watching?
Mark towards subject B. Stretch your net. Crouch. Vertical movement up and down.
All right, so that gives a short insight into how the core setting for this piece works. So the first, or yeah, the majority of the piece kind of happens or exists within this super empty kind of artificial world, and centering around this idea of a constructed self and a constructed reality surrounding the characters within that piece. Maybe I should say for now. And it has this kind of this iteration process of redoing something over and over again, and it has this strong aspect of control and how to for these human executors how to relate to that. And there are several components of the piece are being AI generated. So it has this part of it being a setting, a system that the kind of the performers or the humans, the characters kind of are driven by. And this ranges from the text generation of it, the command generation, and up to now we heard these speaking voice. Up to now we heard the computer voices with AI generated texts, and so there are these two components within the piece, parts that are so super artificial, like the ones we've been looking at so far. And then in the next part, I would like to talk about there are also parts that appear much more natural. So like realistic speaking voices, realistic singing voices, and realistic instruments. I'm gonna come to that in a moment. So let me just go one further. Oh yeah, no, okay, we're already there. So yeah, I can already say that. So up this what I mentioned before is what I'm interested in are often two things. This kind of creating a setting like the one that we had before, and then re-looking at it a bit from a different angle. And the other thing is thinking of it also kind of like a test setting that is not just displaying something, but that actually is has some kind of an impact on the people exposed to it. So what one can observe is that for the performers taking part in this, they actually kind of also relived something or did something that is actually just what the piece is about. So it's kind of self-referential in that sense that they are actually exposed to the same structure that the piece tries to has a narration about. So within the middle of the piece, there's this break where it kind of the whole video part dissolves, and we have this moment of actually looking at the performers on stage, like speaking with their real voices, actually playing an instrument and not these virtual instruments all the time. So there's this kind of twist from going to these projected personas to something more intimate and more real. I'm gonna play a little moment.
Here I am in this institute. In this staging on the stage. Giving my body to show the experience and the imagination of another person. Here I am. Renting out my flesh. As a real-life animation figurine.
All right. So it has this moment now kind of is supposedly kind of getting closer to the actual humans within that setting, and this is kind of the aforementioned other layers of AI generated content are now coming into play. So all these things also are computer generated. So it is the voice of the actual performer also when they sing, when they play the instruments, but we just trained on their data sets and generated all the text and everything for them. So none of it has any like real resemblance, or none of these words were ever spoken by the people within that setting. So it's just a different form of artificiality, or a different form of unrealness, let's say. So I also had a slide that went more into the music, but I think I'm gonna skip over that. So a similar thing happens for them playing the percussion, the zither, and the flute. But so this the piece then kind of goes back and forth between these artificial components that we had before and these like pseudo-realistic or pseudo-natural versions of the performance, and we and this happens with the singing and with in the interplay between light being more kind of situated in the here and now, and the video more in the virtual, if you want. And the for me interesting part is that it's different layers of deception, or different layers of not of or projected identities, let's say. So there are different ways of looking at it, and it's kind of trying to peel one off after the other without really getting to one in the end. So I think I mentioned some parts of this already. So in this self-referentiality of the setting is this kind of a replication of the labor of the performers participating in this piece, as a kind of recreation of the story that the piece is about. And it's a continuous process of trying to get to something that actually might be at the center of it, or that actually might be something like a underlying identity or soul. This is where the piece obviously draws its name from. And I'd like to finish with one little excerpt that kind of tries to, that offers a solution of breaking this system, and that is the clip I would like to finish with. And so I'm gonna play a short excerpt for you.
When you are so broken, and by all means try to understand why you are acting like you are. It starts to feel impossible, like a puppet, a robot, a made machine. We are analyzing ourselves from the outside. In therapy, in introspection, in the mirror, in a dramatic play, trying to grasp with a tool that we have. The tool that we are. An impossible loop. An impossible loop.
All right, maybe up to this moment. So it's yeah. One thing maybe I didn't stretch enough yet is so there's this comparison between the simulated part and this kind of actually somewhat real part of it. And the other thing I'm always interested in is kind of this looking inside a setting or looking outside of the setting. So here's like really this kind of constructed box of reality where we can see people being placed inside. So again, it's also these analogies between machines that are producing reality. May it be the theater, may it be a computer, or may it be our brain. And it is this kind of this machine producing reality that we are looking from the outside, looking in it, and seeing these actors in this kind of test setting and navigating around. But it's also the other way around, this idea of being a spectator of your own actions. So going back maybe to this big arch, like who is in control of this body, and how maybe you are kind of somewhat like an observer, you're looking out of this body. I'm looking outside. I open my eyes, and this world around me appears, and I'm kind of following along. So it's this looking from the inside to the outside, and from the outside to the inside, and it's always about these. It's always about the interface, separating the two things, and I think in the previous talk I also saw one of the literature links was from Thomas Metzinger, and what he calls the transparent interface, something that resonates a lot with me. This idea of the interface between the inside and the outside, between how you look from what is really inside of you to the outside of you, that it's just not graspable. And some of these pieces kind of often focus or revolve around the interfaces. And in the piece that I've shown, it is like you can really feel it with your hand. It's kind of the layer, this holographic screen that separates audience and the staging, the outside and the inside, and a kind of a desire to also remove that, desire to approach something that maybe is real in some way. And I like technology, or these technology-driven settings in changing the systems, and kind of I think the most they really can do is kind of point out how not fixed they are and how changeable they are. And it's this desire to get to something meaningful. And here within that piece, it's kind of just taking one layer after the other, leaving the personas in that piece stating, "Here I am," as a kind of last credo of the piece. So it's just a kind of an acceptance of arriving, and kind of arriving and accepting the being thrown in the here and now. And that's, I think, what I wanted to talk about with you, and I thank you for your patience. And yeah.
Are there any questions?
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I think I don't quite get the impact of the AI in your last work. Like in those texts, is it only reading it, or is it composing it?
Yeah, it was used to compose the text and to read it. And so, yeah, it is used to generate the text, like the spoken parts and the commands of it. And then the first part of it is it's just this kind of computer voice. So that's just computer voice. And then from the moment on, it gets kind of, let's say, personal or real, or where the voices and instruments and the choirs and all these things are being used. Then it is for that AI models are used to kind of to generate these realistic sounding voices and so on and so forth. So it's text and command generation and the generation of everything that actually sounds not so much like machine generated. So there's a lot of really artificial stuff in the piece. It's so digital, all the sounds in it. And those are really just computer generated, whereas everything that kind of makes you feel, now it's not anymore. This is the AI generated components.
And concerning the pictures, like the video and stuff, it's also AI generation or generated?
No, it's not, unfortunate, or I don't know whether you can say unfortunately. No, it's all generated in Unity. So it's kind of taking this a software design for computer games and kind of just exporting it or like projecting it into the real life space.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Thank you for that. I don't know how to ask that so much, but I'll just try. First of all, your work is very impactful, and I find also disturbing, like heavy, that feeling, especially that you end, which I like, about wanting to break out of this condition. And I'm just very curious about, personally, from you as an artist, what and why are you fascinated with these themes of control and being stuck in these loops? And what's your, also if you have an opinion about that, or is it just a research of this phenomena? And where does it come from you? Like, it's really interesting for me.
So I think it is highly personal. So I'm not sure what a good way of answering that question is without being too cliche. So for me it's really I have this really super well organized and controlling and kind of being in charge part of myself. I really have this other part, kind of a lot of the other previous pieces also were more also situated in the kind of rave or hallucinogenic parts and so on. So this, in general, this big idea of letting go or surrendering to something, surrendering to a system or accepting something or giving yourself in or leaving something behind is, I think that's really just really something that really interests me personally, that I heavily engage in, both in my work but also as a private person. And then I don't know, that I think that kind of just started to go hand in hand very well, that it's judgeable, but it's, for me at least, it makes sense because I mean I've always been working with technology somehow, and there's the side aspect that's just immanent in a lot of this technology, that everything kind of has to do with surveillance, control, immersion, and these things like this. So, and what maybe I can say that what for me really is interesting is to create pieces that maybe are disturbing, but that are a lot of them are really ambivalent, I would say. So, and that also I think reflects both my view on technology, or also how I coordinate through this life. So Anima is one of the most staged pieces that I've done. A lot of the other ones are really just throwing people into a scenario where they have to kind of deal with it. And and I think for me that's the most interesting part about art, is creating this kind of experience space where these aspects are become sensible for the participants, and that can really be the audience and the performers alike.
Hello. Okay. Also, thank you for the presentation and the clips. I liked the example with the warehouse that you gave, and also was particularly intrigued where you described your own experience there and the one of the performers. It felt a bit like you were both audience, composer, like your role there. It felt like, oh, as an audience, if I would have bought a ticket or if I would have subscribed, I would have loved to be there, you know, also. So in the last piece I saw, I might have seen it wrong or interpreted it wrong, but more again like this classical stage audience thing. And it's a broad open question. Maybe one, do you feel like a struggle, or how do you deal with audience role and maybe just dealing with audience and spaces in general? And maybe do you have any plans in the future, or is it a question that you try to tackle or are concerned with, or
this question concerns me a lot, and so actually really in this piece the role of the audience was was really much more classical. I haven't really done that in the last few years before that. So for example, for Genesis, which you referred to in that piece, I actually really liked it that nobody ever saw this massive space and this world that was created there. But there was a piece that led up to Genesis called Control that was kind of similar, but there were no performers as avatars, but it was audience. So you were thrown in there and you became the avatar. And then after 30 minutes, you moved one level up and you became the controller. And then you moved one level up and then you became kind of the supervisor. So a lot of these pieces also really make these different spaces experienceable for the audience. And it's something I actually really like. So and I'm concerned with a lot, and for me it's going back to a staged performance really is a bit of a sacrifice. But the thing is, you can also get other things that you can't get in these immersive settings so well, and I think it was just time again. So you can have all this precision, all this dramaturgy and everything so finely tuned, which in the other kinds of settings you can't have so well.
Yeah. I was reminded a bit of this classical film, The Synecdoche of New York thing, where the guy builds a warehouse and keeps extending and extending it. And maybe last question, do you feel constrained maybe by because I can imagine this classical stage is also very practical. If you go to a public scene, to a concert venue, whatever, it's built for this kind of works also. Do you have any thoughts about maybe the way the current, do you think there should be a change in maybe welcoming artists like you to actually engage them, or is this dichotomy between performer audience roles? Is it sort of blocking, or do you have any reflection? Do you feel blocked maybe in?
No, I don't. Okay. I mean, I feel every setting that you go into always has a lot of constraints. It's just different constraints. So But no, normally when people ask me to do something, I say, okay, we can do something, but not on a stage, but somewhere else, and that normally works. So I'm quite okay. It was a conscious choice to do it here. It's I think for me it's really more what can you get out of each of the settings, and it's I think kind of doing this and sometimes emphasizing more a kind of stage dramaturgic part as opposed to having something that's super immersive with a lot of freedom. So if everybody has a lot of freedom in an immersive setting, the amount of precision and dramaturgy you can get in is obviously limited. But yeah, no, I mean, of course, yeah. No, I think I said what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you.
There was another question over here. No, you had a question.
So I have a question about like the speed of life in your pieces. Like it's kind of submersed, you know. It's like it feels like as a watcher I'm entering a kind of hypnosis or a state of like. And what would you say that function is? Are you looking for that unnaturalness of life, or?
I think it's probably true in the excerpts that we saw here. I actually come from an aesthetic that's really kind of super information overload in your face. So actually in iMAL it was for me the idea to go really, really in the opposite direction. But I think why I went for that is not so much this kind of calmness or so, but the emptiness of it, or the hollowness. And in general, this I think I described that also with this fabric hall in the work Genesis, but it's kind of also a bit this post-digital look at the world somehow. So this emptiness of it, or this artificiality of it, and for me it felt kind of stretching it out like this. It felt like things being placed in time, or things being placed in space. It's something that you normally often, or that you have in a computer game. In a computer game you always feel like it's a three-dimensional space, and then a hammer lies there, and a gun lies there, or whatever, and it feels so dislocate, or it feels so it doesn't feel continuous. It feels like it's a few components, and kind of trying to recreate that imposes looking at this here and now through the eyes of the digital. But I think for me it also exposes something more beyond that, something I don't know, the choices that we had or the complex also the kind of the artificiality of the now, of the reality, which we kind of seem to overlook a lot. I think we should probably close in order to not use up all the time for the following roundtable. So thank you for being here, and see you later.